Welcome everyone to a new tutorial. Thank you everybody for waiting for this. I know you've been asking, so I wanted to introduce a new design and some new tools we'll be using today. This design was inspired by waves that can be generated by water or by sound. Now, sound waves can be expressed in linear form like you'd see on a stereo mixing board, but they can also be expressed in radial form. And a lot of people don't know this, but they can be. It's almost like what you would see in waves of water radiating out, but it's different. They're in these columns. So I wanted to base this design on this idea of a heartbeat, making a radial image on the heart, as if the heart was beating and coming out from within the stone. So that's kind of the thing I was going for, and you can tell me what you think about it. Once again, I'm using this wonderful silicone mold from the Happy Dotting Company. Thank you, Angela, for your wonderful products. Be sure and check her out in the description of the video. And I'm also using some stencils from the Dotting Center. Hi, Rachel. I love your things. We're going to be using your stencils today and also some of your applicator bottles with the microtips. So this is how you use one of Rachel's stencils on a stone. You can use these on canvases, on stone, on mugs, all sorts of things. And today I'm using her Chrysanthemum Stencil and my General's charcoal white pencil. And I've already made the stone, I've let it cure, I've painted it black, and we're ready to go. Now you can see as I turn the stone, there is a definite edge to the design, and you can just sketch over that lightly with your charcoal white pencil. This type of pencil can be erased just with a wet Q-tip. It's very easy to get these lines off. But we're just going to sketch that outline lightly. And that's going to be the perimeter of our design. So I'm using the center of the stencil to line up on the center dot of the mold. And just going to make a little mark there, making sure the inner circle of this stencil is sitting inside the heart design. It just fits in there perfectly. I love the way these two things work together. And I'm making sure that V ends up in between the two petals at the top of the heart. And I'm just going to start filling in the spaces on the stencil. These stencils can be a lot of fun, especially if you're getting a little tired of the same old design with the same number of petals. You want to do something a little different, but you don't know quite how to do it with a compass. So the stencils are wonderful. They can give you a whole different shape to work with, which is a lot of fun. So once you get the basic stencil lines on there, you're just going to connect them. Just lightly sketch them on. You can follow the curves. Sketching them on, and then I'm going to turn it until I have all of the petals on there. And if you lined it up correctly, that upper corner of the stencil will fit right in with the upper curve of the heart. Isn't that nice? I just love the way that works out. So lots of different tools can be used to make small, same size dots for the outline of this design. You could use a stylus or an angled brush or even a toothpick. Today I'm going to be using a small applicator bottle fitted with a micro tip that I got from Rachel at the Dotting Center. Now all of these tools work well, and I have used them all. It's just a matter of kind of what texture you want in the dot. If you're using a small stylus, this is a polymer clay sculpting tool, you can easily walk the dots because as you move the tool, the dots will get smaller and smaller. That's why I coined the term walking the dots. It just made sense to me. But you have to re-dip your tool every so often to get more paint on it, and that can really slow you down. A small brush like this lovely angled brush can be a little bit difficult to control because the harder you press on it, the larger the dot gets, and you have to reload it, just like you have to reload the toothpicks. And for me, when I'm outlining, I have difficulty seeing small things anyway, even with my glasses. It can be kind of hard on a big project. So these paint bottles are wonderful. They can allow you to work more quickly and to create little beads of paint that really stand up. You'll see that they create their own shadows here. They really are like little beads or little pearls. And as you get some practice and you get consistent pressure on the bottle as you're moving, almost like decorating a cookie or a cake, you can really move along more quickly and get beautiful little dots that really stand up and give your design more texture and more depth. So I've sped it up a little bit here. I'm not really moving that fast, but sometimes it feels like it with these bottles. So I went all the way around, and now I'm just going back on the other curve until they're all connected, and then I'll be doing that final outline of the heart. And I'm not outlining the circle, that's just a guideline to give me the half mark on that petal. You can also use these tips to draw lines of paint instead of dots. This is something we haven't done before, so I wanted to show you how. I'm really not very good at this yet, but I'm learning and I want to try more and more because it does give you a little bit different look to the outlines if this is the type of mandala you like to do. So you just kind of drag it almost like you're dragging glue or frosting. And if you use a medium bodied paint, this usually comes out very nice. And then I just decided to dot the outline of the heart. So they're a little bit different using the same stencil, and you'll see how this works out as we continue to paint. But first I'm going to let these dry completely before we start painting. So this is actually the next day, and I'm mixing up some paints. I used a medium to heavy-bodied red acrylic, and then I'm mixing with drops of either magenta or white or yellow to create several different shades or tones in the red scale. So I'm going to start with the deepest magenta, and remember your acrylic paints will dry about 1.5 to 2 shades darker than they are when they're wet. So that's why I lightened these up just a little bit. So you're just going to drag a small dot inside that space of the first row of petals. And don't worry about the asymmetrical center. It will be covered up by a large red dot toward the end of the design. So then you use a slightly larger stylus to drag a red dot toward the center. And this is pretty fun. I really like dragging dots. On this tool I have one end that's a little bit larger than the other, so I use the large end to place the dot, and then I flip it over and use the small end to drag the dot. Some people call these swooshes, and swooshes can be a lot of fun when you get some practice. So I'm gonna use the orange tone to make small dots on either side of the red dot, and then drag those toward the center. And you really need to be careful. You don't want to overstep your lines here, but if you really snug it in there, you can make it. And because the beads are a little bit bigger, because we used the applicator bottle, it's going to make this a little bit easier to set them in that. It almost makes it like a little frame for you to place these swooshes, and it creates just a lovely little three-pointed design. Red down the middle and then the orange on either side. Now I'm moving to the lighter shade of the magenta to dot and drag toward the center again on the next row of petals. And I'm going to place this dot right above the circle line, just kind of like it's sitting on it, like a bird on a wire. And I'm going to load the dot with enough paint so I can drag a long tail down to the point of the petal. It's really nice to have that center circle guideline on there so you're not guessing where to put that, and then afterwards you get a very pleasing symmetrical look to the mandala design. So we're just going to place these magenta dots all the way around and drag them toward the center. There should be enough space. And then use the cherry red paint to drag dots on either side of the magenta line. Doing the same technique where you're just dragging that, snugging it inside the borders of the petal that you made with the white dots that are nice and dry. Makes a little frame. And you'll see we're leaving the end of the petal black. And the reason for that is it's going to give the appearance that the mandala is actually coming out from within the heart, that it's behind it. So we're going to snug those red dots just in there, drag these down to a point, and then I'm going to go back to that orange paint and just place a small red dot at the end of the second row. There was just enough space there. And then I'm going to set this aside to dry while I go over and start on the second stone that we did with the lines. I'm going to paint it in basically the same way. That's why I'm fast forwarding here. You don't need to see it step by step. Basically the same thing. We're just dragging dots toward the center. I didn't need to do the first row in the magenta. There just wasn't enough space because the lines kind of filled that in. So I'm just going to leave that black and white. There's the second row, and now I'm on the third row with the magenta. And on this one, instead of going back to the cherry red, I decided to go back to the darker magenta just to give a little bit different look. So I'm going to use the paint applicator bottle. This is another one. Rachel gave me actually a whole box of these paint bottles. It's wonderful, and I'm going to use them all the time now. I just took the lid off of it, and I'm going to use it to make a nice fat red bead in the middle of each stone. This is going to cover up the asymmetrical parts of the center, and it's just going to give a real nice center to draw your eye. This is a medium-bodied acrylic, and it just comes out of the bottle and flows so nicely. And I'm just going to tap the stone a little bit to release any air bubbles. Set that aside. And then I'll add a little bit of white to create a lighter shade of this magenta, and I'm going to go back and do a few top dots just to get that outer petal to glow a little bit more. So some pink top dots, I'm doing that on both stones. Really want it to look like it's illuminating from within the stone. And then some light orange top dots on the inner ring. So we definitely get a boom boom in the look of the radial sound waves. You can definitely see there are two different tones going here, an orangish tone and then a pinkish tone, but both in a circle and radiating out from within the stone outward. Now all that's done. So I'm going to fill the outer edge of the heart, mixing up shades of a stone gray. I'm using black paint and white paint, and also mixing in some of the red to make sure I stay in the red tones. And then I'm just going to keep mixing back and forth until I get 3 nice shades of this stone gray. There they are. And I'm just going to fill that space. I'm going to use a little small stylus. Use small dots of all 3 shades to fill in the outermost spaces, leaving the ends of the petal black. And you just keep dotting and dotting and dotting. Boy, you just keep going at it. When you think you're done, go back and put in a few more tiny dots. And don't give up. I always tell people, go back and do more. Go back and do more, because you can fit more. So this creates a stone wall look, as if the heartbeat is breaking through this stone wall. And you can experiment with different background colors. I decided on the second stone to go with this bluish turquoise fade for the background color, just for a different look. You can experiment with your favorite colors. Just going to fill that in, lots of tiny dots. And there's the blue faded background on the lined heart. So I let this dry overnight. That's why I'm touching it. I don't want to scare anybody. It is dry. They are both dry. It turned out lovely. And I left the outer edges of this blank because I thought it'd be really cool to write names on them for perhaps the name of a wedding anniversary. I decided to do my brother Tom and his wife Connie. They're coming up on 35 years of bliss together. They're so wonderful. And so I just sketched it in the charcoal white pencil, and then I'm going to go back with this silver pen because their wedding colors were actually pink and gray. So I thought it would be nice to do it in the gray. Just draw that on there. My handwriting isn't perfect, but that's okay. My brother will still like it. And before you do a finishing spray or resin, be sure to remove any remaining guidelines with a wet Q-tip. I always forget that step. And then if you wanted to use a resin, it will take longer to dry, but it will make a hard glass-like finish. Or you can use a clear acrylic spray, which will dry very quickly. I finished this stone with the clear acrylic spray, and you can see it's nice and shiny. And it just seals the paint and tends to make it a little bit brighter as well. Will help it last longer, especially if you're going to set them outside. But that is finished. I just want to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. Thank you so much for being such loyal subscribers and for all your encouragement. I love you all.